is David. I'm one of the pastors here at Connect, and we're in a 4-week series called Consumed. And week number 1, we talked about what it means to be consumed with consumerism. Last week, we talked about what it means to live life when you're consumed by debt. If you were not with us either the previous 2 weeks, or if you're watching online and you're just beginning to catch up with who we are, you can find those on our website or through our Facebook page. But this morning, we're stepping into a really, really interesting topic about what it means to be consumed by God. When we're consumed with those other things, we get caught up in the beauty and the circumstance and the lies that tell us that we can have low monthly payments and live the life of our dreams and all the stuff that goes along with that. And so when we buy more and more, we are consumed with consumerism, and as a result of being consumed with consumerism, we get consumed by debt. And part of living in a consumeristic culture is being offered choice after choice. Think about this. If you were to leave here today and go to your average big box store or supermarket and walk through the aisles, you would find over 40 different types of toothpaste alone. How many of you bought 40 different types of toothpaste? They're there. If you were to keep on walking, you would find over 60 different kinds of shampoos. And then imagine trying to walk down the sock aisle. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of socks. Several years ago, I had a missions friend of mine brought a national missionary president from the country of Papua New Guinea. Brought him to the United States, and we're going to raise some support to do some missions work in Papua New Guinea. And when the guy landed, the first place they took him, they said, "Are you hungry?" He said, "Yes." They took him to Golden Corral. I was disappointed. I wanted him to know that Americans actually ate real food. If you're a manager from Golden Corral watching online, I'm just kidding. But he was blown away by the number of food choices on a buffet some of us will visit after church today. And then he said he needed a few things like toothpaste and stuff like that. They told him not to pack all of that. And they took him to Super Walmart. This is a guy from Papua New Guinea walking through. He's blown away with all of that stuff. And when it comes down to it, when we reduce all of our choices down to the absolute lowest common denominator, and we think about what it means to go through life without understanding, really it all boils down to 2 choices. We have to limit things to 2 choices when we're offered these endless number of choices. And we're going to talk about that this morning just a little bit. And I want us to take a look at a passage of Scripture found in the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 12. This is going to help us understand literally what it means to be consumed by God. And as we begin to walk into this, let me give you just a little bit of background. Hebrews was written by a pastor who was pastoring some Jewish Christians who were living in ancient Rome somewhere around 65 AD. These Christians were going through a really, really difficult time, an intense time of persecution and suffering. And they were actually finding it difficult to stay true to their faith, finding it difficult to follow Jesus. And what this pastor does in this little passage we're going to read, he's using it to encourage them. And he wants to challenge them to evaluate what they're going through based on the understanding of what their ancestors experienced. Because as Jewish Christians, they would understand all of the Jewish history. And so here's what he says to them. "See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven?" At that time, his voice shook the whole earth. Now what they're talking about is when Moses had gone up on Mount Sinai and met with God. The cloud was covered everything. They couldn't see Moses. He was up there. But when God spoke to Moses, the earth literally shook. That his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised once more, "I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens." The words "once more" indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things. so that which cannot be shaken remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire. Now, right from the beginning, in verse number 25, this pastor is challenging these ancient followers of Jesus with this choice, the choice that you and I were talking about this morning. Will you receive or will you reject God and His vision for your life? It's a pretty intense question, wouldn't you agree? It's a pretty intense question, and so what this guy does, he gives us a pretty intense image with which to deal with it. He's showing us how big and how awesome God is. You know, right before all this, he'd been talking to them about Mount Sinai and the Old Testament and Moses and the stuff that I briefly explained to you as we were reading through it. Moses had warned the people of Israel to take God seriously. And when God showed up that day, and the mountain was consumed with fire and smoke, and the ground around the mountain literally trembled, it quaked, and it shook in the presence of God. This represented to all of those people, that these new Jewish Christians would understand, just the absolute awesomeness and power of God Almighty. And then he keeps strolling through in the next couple of verses, and he goes on and says, this God who shook this mountain will one day in the future shake this world. And God isn't going to shake the world because He's having some divine temper tantrum. He's mad and starts stomping his foot and the earth shakes. No, that's not what God's doing. God's going to shake things up to show and prove what kind of things really last. That's what He's saying there in verse 27 when He says, this removing of those things which can be shaken and of created things. All the things, quite frankly, in which humankind places our hope and our identity and our value. All those things, the author is saying, will not survive the shaking that God's going to do. This won't last on the other side of eternity. And God is doing this so that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. So that we can invest our lives in the things that will last. So that we can give our lives to the things that really matter. Because a choice is being put out before us. And folks, this is life-defining stuff. And then in verse 28 he says, so here's how we deal with this. In light of this all-inspiring vision of God and all of His power, we are challenged to invest our lives in the things that really matter. And those who put our hope in Jesus, as those who want to be consumed by God and not by stuff, since we're receiving this kingdom of God, this way of life, this value system, the one that can't be shaken, that can't be moved. We want to live lives of gratitude in light of who God really is and all of that God really wants to do with us. To be consumed by God is to live as though God is the center of the universe, and not just the center of the universe in this big, far-out, cosmic understanding, but the center of the universe in as much that He is the center of my life and your life. I want to live in this compartmentalized, segmented understanding where we're partially human and partially holy and partially loving God and partially loving self. Partially living on Sundays when we hear a message and then going out on Monday through Saturday as if the message doesn't happen. So in verse number 29, the writer brings it home to his people. He says the choice of what kind of life we're going to live ends with understanding that God is a consuming fire. Now when we think of that, we think about a fire that comes and consumes and burns and eats up everything. For instance, a couple of months ago, some of you were here when my wife Tammy was up there talking about some of the work she was doing on behalf of her corporation and went into Northern California, and literally an entire city, an entire community had been incinerated by fire. That's a consuming fire, right? That's one version of it where everything is absolutely destroyed. And we think about a consuming fire as an act, in some cases, of judgment. But the Bible also talks about a consuming fire in a different context. The Bible also talks about how a consuming fire is not all-consuming in the sense that it is destroying, but all-consuming in the sense that it is purifying. See, fire consumes, but it also purifies. In 2 Peter in the New Testament, Peter writes these words in chapter 3. But when the day of God's judgment does come, it will be unannounced like a thief. The sky will collapse with a thunderous bang, everything disintegrating in a huge... I can't even pronounce that word. Earth and all its works exposed to the scrutiny of judgment. Since everything here today might well be gone tomorrow, do you see how essential it is to live a holy life? Daily expect the day of God, eager for its arrival. The galaxies will burn up and the elements melt down that day, but we'll hardly notice. We'll be looking the other way, ready for the promised new heavens and the promised new earth, all of them landscaped in righteousness. See, Peter is talking about what we would call in the Christian church the day of the Lord, the day when Christ comes. And that's the future day when God's going to do all the shaking. And Peter tells us that when that day comes, the world and even the heavens are going to be consumed. They're going to be destroyed. But again, the reminder, the imagery here is not God throwing a temper tantrum and God trying to destroy everything. It's all about God deconstructing something that no longer serves his purposes so that he can construct something that is new and living and alive that serves his future purposes. Do you understand the difference? Anybody here ever remodeled a house? You didn't remodel your house because you were mad at your house, did you? We're building out this space over here. It used to be like drugstore and some other things. We're not remodeling because we're mad at it. We had to deconstruct all the stuff that served a purpose there and then, but no longer serves a purpose here and now, no longer serves a purpose in the future. In the same kind of way that you would remodel a house, or we're putting together this new facility. You remodel something and you deconstruct it because it no longer meets your needs, it no longer serves your purposes, it's outdated and it's outlasted its time, so that you can create something fresh, something brand new, something that you're looking forward to, something that you'll live toward, something that serves the future purposes. And that's what Peter is saying in his passage, that's what God's doing. In chapter 1, Peter kind of brings that imagery around. Here's what he says in 1 Peter chapter 1. Pure gold put in the fire comes out of it proved pure. Genuine faith put through this suffering comes out proved genuine. And when Jesus wraps this all up, it's your faith, not your gold. Did you get that line? It's there in your notes. Underline that. When Jesus wraps this entire world up, and the day of the Lord comes, it's your faith, not your gold, that God will have on display as evidence of his victory. See, Peter's talking about going through the trials and the sufferings and the difficulties in this life. And those experiences that feel like we're being put through the fire, but that's happening for the purposes of purifying us and refining our faith for God's purposes. And then what comes out the other side of those experiences proves our faith in Jesus to be more real and more genuine and more lasting. God is a consuming fire, folks. He is big. He is awesome. And because he loves this world and because he loves us, it's in his power that God is choosing to purify my life and your life in light of the things that really matter, in light of the things that are really going to last. And here's what we're going to do for just the next few minutes. We're going to make this really personal. We're going to talk about how it is to live our lives in response to who this God really is, what it means to be consumed by him. So what I want you to do is turn your message notes over from the scripture side to the note side. And we're going to answer this big question that all of us have to reconcile within ourselves. And the question is this: what am I living for? Go ahead and pop that up. What am I living for? Because when you boil it all down, when you reduce all the choices that we have in our consumer culture and in our lives, and we boil it all down to the lowest common denominator, this is the question that defines everything in every single one of our lives. For every single person who is here in Mesa, every single person who lives in the United States, and every single person who has ever lived throughout all of history and all of around the globe. This defines everything. What am I living for? And here's a way to help us do this. You see there underneath it, it's got a little dot, and then you've got kind of an arrow. And you've got a white space there underneath this question at the top of your message notes. Pretend you're an 8th grader and pull that little tray up on the side of your chair, and I want you to draw that. I want you to put a dot, and then I want you to draw out to the side an arrow like that. I told you in my email this week, bring your pens. Put a dot, draw the arrow. Now here's what I want you to do. Underneath the dot, I want you to write these words. Underneath the dot, go ahead to the next slide. The little dot, underneath it, write life on earth. And underneath the arrow, as you can see on the screen, write life in eternity. See, another way of asking the question, what am I living for, is to ask it this way. Am I living for the dot, or am I living for the arrow? Am I living for the dot? Am I living for the arrow? Am I living for life here on earth? Am I living for life in all of eternity? You see, how you and I answer this question, even in the privacy of our own minds, how we answer this question shapes everything about how we do this life. When you choose the dot, here's what you're saying. This life is all there is, so I better get everything I can while the getting's good. Go for all the gusto you can get because you only go around once. I better amass as much stuff as I can. I better have as many experiences as I can. I better have as much pleasure as I can because I'm only going to do my time on this dot one time. I better get all there is because there's nothing else. I better live for myself because I've got one ride on this rock. But when you choose to live for the line, which the arrow represents that it is ongoing, that it is perpetual, everything changes. What changes most is how you live your time on this dot, shaped by the important things under the arrow. See, your view of God and your view of eternity really do matter here and now. It shapes how you live your life here and now. In fact, there in your outline, the first little sentence there with the fill in the blank, I put it like this. When you are consumed by God, you live with eternity vision. See, when you live your life in full view of the bigness and the awesomeness and the enormity of God, you live your life in light of eternity. You don't live your life believing that everything is here, right here, and right now is all there is. When you're consumed by God, you live with eternity vision. When I was a little kid in elementary school growing up, I used to love to come home from school, turn on my black and white TV set, and watch Superman. How many of y'all remember George Reed? There's a bunch of old people in here. I thought Superman was great. I wanted to be Superman. Mom wouldn't let me wear my underwear on the outside of my pants. But the thing I wanted that Superman had wasn't the fact that he could bounce bullets off his chest. It wasn't the fact that he had cool underwear on the outside of his pants. The thing that he had this cape, the thing that he had that I wanted was X-ray vision. I wanted to be able to see what was going on in the other rooms of the house because I was little and I was scared and I wanted to know what was in there before I got in there. I wanted to see if the bullies at school were in the next classroom over when I was doing the gym class or I'd go in the locker room. I wanted to see through walls. I wanted to have X-ray vision. I didn't want to be limited to seeing just what was in front of me. That's kind of how eternity vision works in the spiritual sense. We see a lot more as a follower of Jesus. I want to have eternity vision. It's not just that I want to see the future. I want to see more than just what's in front of me. I want to live every moment of my life right now in light of what's to come. A year ago this time, a couple of you that I've been in small groups with and stuff were aware that my mom's oldest sister, my Aunt Phyllis, was literally in the last days of stage 4 cancer. She had been fighting it since somewhere around the summer or the fall of 2017, so just a little over a year, and she was now coming down to the last days of her life. I can remember as a little boy when my Aunt Phyllis wasn't a Christian. And then I remember right about the time I got to late elementary school or early junior high school when my Aunt Phyllis said yes to Jesus and became a Christian. And somehow she immediately morphed from a person who did things her own way for her own purpose and how she and her husband viewed life to this woman of amazing prayer, amazing faith, and living life for others. She hadn't been a Christian very long, and the first thing she did in the church that she was going to was she looked around and began to realize that they had all these Sunday school classes, and they had women's Bible studies, and men's prayer breakfasts, and they had children's ministry, and they had youth ministry. But this church that for our little community was a decent-sized church had no special needs ministry. First ministry she ever started in her life was a Sunday school class with weekday activities for people who had special needs. And all of her life, her prayer life just began to grow and grow and grow. And it was really no real surprise to me when I'd call home, and she spent pretty much the better part of the last several months of her life living with my parents. And I'd talk to her on the phone, and she would be telling me about how she was using those last weeks and months of her life, my words, not hers at this moment, with eternity vision. Because here's what she did. As all of my siblings and cousins and all of her children and grandchildren were coming in and talking to her bit by bit, piece by piece, she never made it about her pain, though she was in pain. She never made it about her struggle, though she was struggling. She never made it about the fact that she only had days or weeks to live, though everybody knew that. The one thing she kept doing with the days and weeks that she still had in front of her was reminding every one of her nieces and nephews and grandchildren that eternity is real. That earth is a real place and earth is temporary. Heaven is a real place and heaven is eternal. That earth is a dot, a speck in time, and that heaven is eternal and it's ongoing and it's forever. That's what eternity means. You know what's cool? In the midst of her pain, in the midst of battling the cancer and the chemo and all that stuff, she could look at some of my siblings and some of my cousins and her grandchildren, and she could say things to them about eternity that I could never say to them. And more importantly, they would hear things about eternity from her they would never accept from me. Because she was just days and weeks away. And what she said, and my prayer is, over the next 2 or 3 weeks of my life, however long God gives me, is that you will make a decision in your life and I'll see you then too. That's how she lived her life. That's how she spent all of her days before she got sick. Much less after she got sick. It was just a natural product. It was a reminder that this life is temporary. And for some of you in this room this morning, the death of someone you know and the love that has caused you to think about the future and about eternity, sometimes it takes one of those kinds of experiences to remind us that this world is not all there is, to remind us that there is something more, that there is something else out there and beyond this. What if today, and moving forward, for however much longer you're going to spend on this rock, what if you were so consumed by God that every day when you got out of bed, you chose to live that day with eternity vision? How would that change things for you? How would eternity vision change the relationships that you're involved in? How would it change how we interact with the people closest to us? If we lived with eternity vision in our marriages, perhaps it would cause us to live for something more than just getting our own needs met. We might see that God has given us a spouse so that while we're on this earth, we can learn to live and love more like Jesus lived and loved. In our relationship with children, we might not see them as little people that we're trying to endure, especially through junior high school, while they're awake and they live in our home and counting down the days until they graduate high school, but with eternity vision. We see them as potential image bearers of Jesus Christ and as a treasure to whom we have produced the responsibility and the opportunity to help them live life right on the dot so that they can live life eternally through the arrow. When we live with eternity vision with our children, we believe that how we live our lives can not only change their lives, but it can change the generations beyond them through their lives. If we live with eternity vision, how would we view our jobs? Would our jobs simply be the place we go or the thing we do to make money and we live for the weekends and maybe make a name for ourselves in the process? Or would we view our jobs as an opportunity to live out God's kingdom values here on earth through what we do? Would we see our work as an opportunity to partner with God and how He cares for human beings and how we treat those people who are different from us in the workplace? And this is how God is going to restore certain things in the world. If we live with eternity vision, how would we view the money that we make from those jobs? Would we see money as a resource to amass so that we can live in pleasure and comfort while we're on the dot? Or would we see money as a tool which God can use to further His message and His love and His hope throughout our world and change people's eternities because of that? When we live with eternity vision, folks, it changes everything. The great Martin Luther once said, "I have held many things in my hands, and I've lost them all. But whatever I placed in God's hands, I still possess." See, that's living for the line and not for the dot. That's being consumed by God and living with eternity vision. So real quickly, I want to bounce two thoughts off of you about eternity vision. There in your outline, thought number 2 is this: eternity vision dictates what I invest in. Would you agree that at least in the United States, we live in a culture that tempts people with money towards the ideal of getting rich? Would you agree with that? And you think, our culture is obsessed with the idea that the path to true happiness lies in having more, and more. Do you know what it's either number 1 or number 2 most booming business in the United States over the last 20 years has been? Self-storage. I'm not joking. Self-storage. Did you know that there are approximately 60,000 self-storage businesses in the world, and 50,000 of those are in the United States alone? You see them all over the place, and guess what? Most of these self-storage units are filled with stuff. Now think about this, okay? We talked about being enslaved to debt last week, right? This hits home for some of us. I know it hits home for me. People are making monthly payments to store stuff they no longer have room for, to make room to buy more stuff they probably can't afford. Right? You know, I told you a couple weeks ago at the outset that Tammy and I, we don't have debt other than a reasonable mortgage, and we try to be generous to churches and different charities, but that I personally occasionally struggle with consumerism, and I gave you some examples of that. I don't know, maybe I'm different from everybody else in this room. Maybe that makes you feel a little bit better, but I struggle with stuff. There's stuff that catches my eye. I can go wandering around and see what other people have or what they're wearing, and I'm thinking, I like that. I want some of that stuff. From time to time, I get this stuff way out of perspective. See, many of us, we have a little success, we make a little money, and then we go out and we buy a little chunk of stuff. And then the problem isn't that we have a little bit of money. As I told you in week 1, there's absolutely nothing wrong with making money, having money, and being wealthy. I also told you in week 1, there's nothing wrong with having stuff. but it's the perspective, because then we don't go through our lives thanking God for the blessings of all that we have and honoring Him and asking God to help us manage all that we have in that process. What happens is we go ahead and make it all about us. And that means we're still consumed with self. We're not consumed with God. We just start buying and spending right up to the amount that we have. And then we have to make more because we want to spend more. And then it becomes this form of this economic cycle of insanity, as sociologists call us. It's nuts. And in the process, sometimes we don't even realize it until it's essentially too late. Our marriages suffer, our children suffer, our families suffer, and there's no more time for relationships, and our spiritual lives suffer because there's no more time for church, there's no more time for devotions, there's no more time to get involved in Awana, there's no more time to be a part of a connection group, and then our character suffers, and then there's no more time for God. David, what do you mean be consumed by God? I don't have time to be consumed by God, would be the honest answers for some of us in this room. Leads me to my third thought. Eternity vision resolves a never-ending quest for it. Sometimes we think that when we have it, we'll be more admired, we'll be more significant, we'll be more famous. Sometimes we like to purchase status symbols. And here's what we do. We equate our net worth with our self-worth. And folks, I want you to understand something in this life. I want you to hear it loud and clear. I want you to put your pens down. I want you to do something you may have not done in months. I want you to look right at me. Don't you ever, ever confuse your value with the amount of valuables you have. It's not God's plan. That's not how God works. Never confuse your value with your valuables. How much you own has nothing to do with your personal worth. You are worth the life and the death and the blood of the Son of the Creator of life, God Almighty, with whom you're going to spend eternity. Never, ever relate your values to your valuables. Your net worth and your self-worth are not the same. I've never been a particularly materialistic or greedy person, but I struggle with it sometimes in material ways and sometimes in non-material ways. I remember as a little kid, I used to eat Wheaties because I thought they would make me better in gym class. And then I remember back then, some of you remember, when like in cereal boxes, if you had so many proofs of purchase, you could get stuff. And I remember that I ate Wheaties for like 3 meals a day for 3 straight weeks. Because if I had done 3 proofs of purchase, I could send off and get what I thought were authentically autographed sweatbands and a headband by some of the most popular NBA players of the day. Guys like Walt Frazier, Wilt Chamberlain, Earl Monroe. Some of you recognize those names. And I did it. And I got them. And I'll never forget the day I got them. The next day was gym class. And I went into gym class. And I put them on, and I was all excited. I had my white sweatband with the autographs for those players and on each hand, and I had the headband on, and I was all excited. And then a bully in my class named Dennis decided he didn't like it. He took my headband and ripped it off and broke it. And then my mom decided she was going to come to the rescue. Oh, no, it's worse than you're imagining. We had gym class every other day. I still had my sweatbands, but now I had no headband. So here's what my mom did. She went and cut the elastic band off of a pair of white underwear. Convinced me that it looked the same. She will forever face the fires of hell for lying to her 8-year-old son. And I wore it. You believe your mom when you're 8, I haven't believed her since. And worse than Dennis the bully ripping off the real headband was all the other 25 kids in the class laughing at me for wearing that headband. Value and valuables aren't the same. And I went on. I eventually had to get a bicycle, and I wanted to get this orange 10-speed bike, and it had black taped handlebars, and it's great, and I actually used it. It's still hanging in my dad's garage. I'm hoping that Frank and Mike will come by someday and offer me a couple $1,000s for it and put it on pickers. Then right on down. I wanted to make the team in the 7th grade, but by the time I got into high school, I wanted to start. I wanted to play a sort of position, and I wanted to date the it girl in school. And I'm kind of a type A high achiever, and so the quest for it manifested itself early on in my life and the types of jobs I did. And some of you've been there. You know what I'm saying. You remember saying things, well, if I could just get into that college, I'd never want for anything else. If I could land that job, or if I could work for that company, or if I could occupy that office, or if I could have that title, if I made this amount of money, boy, that would be great if I could have this boat, or that weed eater, or I could have that vacation condo. How much further do you have to go? That would be it. And then you get it, and you go, I got it. Ain't it? I have 2 it factors in my life these days, pretty much. There are variables at different times, but basically 2 it factors. It factor number 1 is my wife, my family. Things I want to do with my wife and how I value her. My parents are in town. Mom actually sat through that embarrassing moment a few minutes ago. They're in town for a few weeks. Last Monday night, Tammy and I took them out for their anniversary dinner. It was their anniversary. 58 years. 58 years. We celebrated that, and I looked at Tammy and I said, what do you and I have to do to make it for 58 years? It'd be a lot older than my parents, for starters. But family. I want family in eternity with me. Second thing is doing God's work. Not just because I'm a pastor. I did God's work before I was a pastor. I did it when I was a social worker, and I did it when I worked for the Kroger Corporation, and I did it when I worked for the Meat Corporation. But there's something about the joy and the peace and the inner satisfaction that knows that you're serving the purposes of God here on earth that are going to lead to the continual life and eternity, not just for yourself, but possibly for others around you. I think about all the riches that God has given me. I have Christ in my life. I have my body. I have the forgiveness of God. I have the hope of heaven. I have the courage to go beyond death. I have people who love me and people I love. I get to be a part of this church. I get to have meaning in my life as we serve our community. And I get to experience the presence of the Holy Spirit. Folks, I am consumed by the riches of God. I think Jesus would say to us today, get consumed with me, with my kingdom, with my plan for your life in this world. And if you put me first, and if you follow me, I'll write an adventure story for your life you could never begin to imagine for yourselves. And it's going to have twists, and it's going to have turns, and it's going to have highs, and it's going to have lows. I think Jesus would say, but before you get to spend eternity with me, I'm not going to waste your life. I'm going to use your life to be the answer to someone else's prayer. I'm going to use your life to shape the future of a child. I'm going to use your life to bring my message of hope to someone who's drowning in despair. I'm going to use your life to soothe someone else's pain, to ease someone else's loneliness, to feed someone else who's hungry. I'm going to use your life to set people free from oppression and injustice. I'm going to use your life to deepen someone's faith and to cheer someone on. And in the process of giving yourself away, Jesus says, I will fill you back up and overflowing and give you the adventure of a lifetime. Amen. Folks, most important question every one of us in this room has to answer this morning. Why would you not put your whole life in the hands of God? Trust God fully. To bow your heads. I'm just going to pray for you. I get that there are challenges in life. I get that there are highs and lows and ups and downs. Before I pray, is there anybody here this morning just want to raise their hand and say, David, I want to be consumed by God, and I'm out of balance and I'm a little out of whack, and I got stuff, and I want the adventure you just mentioned. Would you lift your hand up and down? That's all you got to do. Yeah. It's my honor to pray for you this morning. God, it is with humble hearts and open minds and the desire for greater life on the dot, so that we can have greater meaning in the era. God, we come to you and we pray these things and we say, we struggle with stuff, we struggle with perspective, we struggle with balance. God, for those who lifted their hands this morning, I ask two things on their behalf. Number one, thank you for speaking into their lives, and as you speak into them, give them the courage to confess it to you and to make a difference when they walk out. Number two, God, I ask that you would fill them with that all-consuming fire. Consume them with that fire in their families, in their jobs, in their perspective and how they deal with the blessings that you have given them with life and health and forgiveness and a job, children and grandchildren. Everything on this rock is about stewarding it in preparation for the life to come, which there is no end. God, we love you. We honor you. We worship